Hello everyone. So today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Today is the first episode of my bare bone basics series where I'm going to be going over the really nitty gritty simple stuff when it comes to fencing. So, well, historical fencing that is. So most of this should be applicable to any system you're studying. A lot of it is going to be influenced, of course, by the German longsword, as that's the system that I'm most familiar with and tends to require the most explanation. This is due to a lot of the later systems having more intricate diagrams accompanied with their sources or being less vague in their explanations. However, all of the information we're about to cover will also assist in fighting with any weapon, pretty much. So, the very first thing we're going to be going over is footwork, and I apologize for the shakiness of the camera. I couldn't get my stand to be where I was happy with it. So, you'll see a lot of different footwork diagrams out there. For example, there's the traversal footwork pattern from Thomas Page. There is the footwork patterns done by Meyer. There are the diagrams of Destreza. You're going to find a lot of them. But I like to think of fencing as an hourglass, and this is how I commonly explain it, and so I'm going to go over that, essentially. Now, what fencing as an hourglass boils down to is the idea that this here is our middle line. We do not want to cross this middle line as long as our opponent stays here. So, switching hands because maybe that'll be a little more stable. Here is where we begin, and our opponent as well. So the black foot is the left foot, the white foot is the right foot. Standing out of distance, standing out of distance. At the moment, both opponents cannot reach each other without taking a step. So obviously the first step you could take would be to bring your back foot forward along this middle line, which would put it right about there, and then you'd be here. Now, if both opponents do this, they'll end up in a sort of mutual clash. No one will have any immediate advantage over the other. This means that oftentimes our initial attack is going to involve an offline step. So, as you can see, the line is being straddled. When we step, especially offline, we want to make sure that our right foot, or left if you're left-handed, is going to be going all the way to this other side of the line, and that our left foot is going to come back with us, but it's not going to compass around. So, let's talk about that in a little more detail. Oftentimes what will happen is when people go to step offline, they won't rotate, so their toes will continue to point this way. They won't allow themselves to curve around because we want to get an angle. We want to be on this line against that line right here to get a mechanical advantage against this opponent. So letting it curve in sometimes. Other times it's less so, and this is a sort of generalized picture. But the other thing that often happens is they don't allow their left foot to move. If you leave your left foot here, you're going to be very widespread and not very stable. Not to mention if he is attacking you and you don't move both of your feet, you're still where he was attacking at you. So if you're going to try and, for example, use the Krumpfau, one of the plays of the Krumpfau being you literally dodge out of the way, you haven't actually dodged. So we let this foot come with us. Now the second mistake that people make is they make this step too small and this step too big. So oftentimes what will happen is they'll step, rather than going all the way to this side of the line, their foot will end up on the line, and then this guy will go all the way around so that he's on this side of the line. What's happening here is that using momentum, it kind of lends into this sort of ice skater look, where this plants and this has all that extra juice, so it swings around in what I call a fishtail. Now the problem with a fishtail is that rather than your core being facing this way, your core will be lined up with your feet, which will face that way. So you're going to lose a lot of strength. Plus, with your feet crossed, you will not be able to retreat along this line, and you're pretty much stuck going this way, which isn't always a bad thing, but is in this respect. So, the best way to make sure that your offline steps are good is to make this guy big and this guy smaller. Okay? If you find you're crossing up your feet a lot, just make this guy bigger, this guy smaller. Now, obviously, the only way for our opponent to counter this offline step is to step with us as well. So now, this becomes the middle line, and we end up in a situation like we had before. Now there's two ways of dealing with this. Number one, we can keep going this way. That's more rare, but for example, it appears when we're doing the duplirin, where rather than going around our opponent's sword the long way, we instead step and attack them behind their sword, so we continue moving this way. Okay? The reason we have to continue moving this way is because the duplirin does not defend you in any way, because we're attacking behind their sword. So it leaves you very, very open. If you stay in place, you're going to get hit. So instead, we step with it, and now this takes us out of position. Just like the way we dodged here, we're going to dodge here. The other option is to step around the opponent's sword. This is probably the most common play you're going to see. They're going to step forward with their right foot and their attack. You're going to parry that. They're going to step around with the Abnehmen, or the takeoff. Now, you'll notice that we're not stepping back to the center line. We're stepping much further, all the way over to this line. The reason we're doing that is because now that our opponent has stepped with us, their sword is right here in the center. We step to here, we're not going to get that far around it. We've already driven their sword over to this side, which means that we want to have made a huge opening right here. We want to exploit that opening with our step and our attack, which means that they have to move a much further distance to defend themselves. And what this usually ends up doing is, if you don't get them on that hit, you'll get them on the hit after, because they will now basically be moving their hands rapidly to one side or rapidly to the other. And that's a lot of distance to cover. So, really important thing here is that you'll notice we have stepped ever so slightly forward, but we've not stepped past where our initial foot was. Maybe a tiny bit, but not much further. We've not crossed the center line. The reason that this is important is because we want to be hitting them with the tip of our sword. If we step closer, so we go from here to here, you're pretty much guaranteed to hit them with the strong of your weapon. Now, would that be the worst thing in the world historically? Yes and no. Obviously, you're still hitting them with the sword. Sometimes you have no option but to go closer, and it certainly allows you to pommel strike or wrestle or what have you. But you're hitting them with a part of the sword that's not necessarily designed to cut as well as the tip. The other thing is, if your hit does not succeed, you are much closer to them, it's a lot harder to get away. So generally, I advocate that people don't step in that close unless they're actively going for a takedown, which 9 times out of 10 is not the best solution. So, rather than stepping in close, we're instead going to basically just step across or parallel. Now, once again, the left foot goes up, the right foot needs to come with us, that we're standing on this line. This keeps us distance-wise enough, if our opponent's right here, keeps us far enough back that we can hit them with the tip of our sword, but also far enough away that we can defend easily. Okay? A lot of people, especially on this one, will only step up with their left foot. That means that they have to take time to swing this guy back, which delays their withdrawal. It can also sometimes, if the opponent is smart enough to defend themselves, leave them out of position, so they're not going to be able to bring their core into play. As you are striking from your left side, you're not as strong as you're striking from your right side. So that is something to be very aware of. Now, this is just one play. There are a million others, right? But the most important thing about these lines is learning not only how to attack in, but how to leave. So let's talk about that. So, as we talked about before, if we were to step up this way to deal with our opponent who stepped onto this line, we'd keep going this way. Because we're not defending ourselves actively with the sword, we need to keep going on this harsh angle so that he can't follow us very easily. We're essentially outrunning his sword. Since his sword is starting on this side, when he cuts, it comes from this way. If we continue to step this way, we're going further and further away from where the sword is going, which means that movement will save us, even if our block isn't particularly great, right? And I'll be talking about this in probably not the next video, but one of the ones coming after this, where movement can save you on a bad block. But if you're not intent upon defending yourself with the sword, this is the way to go, okay? And obviously, if you manage to hit them on this side and are doing the duplirin or something like that, then this is the way to go, past them, right? Now, if you're not going to go past them, then things change a little bit. For example, let's say we go through that play again, right? Attack, Abnehmen, right? So now we're here. Where's the best place for us to withdraw? We can go past them. That is an option. And since Their sword is now on the inside of our sword. That's not a bad option. However, since we've already hit them and we're staying at distance, there's no need to get any closer to them. So we're going to withdraw on this line, right? Generally, when it comes to withdraws, you want to withdraw at an angle. Never go straight back. The reason for this is that if his sword has come out here, like let's say, for example, we're on the center line, right? This guy came straight in, I came straight in, we met right here. If I hit him by stepping offline, if I go straight back the way I came, I'm putting myself back in front of his gun, essentially. I want to use the angle that I've created to get away from him. So since we've attacked here, we want to step back here. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, you can also use a wider angle. So for example, if I hit him here, I could also withdraw out this way. I don't have to go directly along the line, but whatever I do, I don't want to step back here. So, to recap, if you're on the attack and you want to gain a mechanical advantage, you need to step offline. Make sure that you step with both feet and that you're fully straddling the line. Okay? Every technique will require a little bit different distance here, but regardless, step with both feet. Bigger on the first step, smaller on the second step. Don't cross the line. If you decide to attack again by going to the other side, make sure you step all the way across. Don't step just directly back in front of them. That gives you the mechanical disadvantage. Make sure your other foot comes with you. If you don't want to defend yourself but want to get away, you want to withdraw past them. If you are going to defend yourself, withdraw at one of these angles. So, that's footwork. Hopefully that makes sense. In the next video, I'm going to talk about handwork.